Now then guys, how's it going? If you want to know how to turn your one-shot color dual narrowband images from looking something like the left-hand shot to looking more like the right-hand shot in as few steps as possible, as quickly and easily as possible, then this is the video for you. I'm going to try and take you through this every single step of the way. I'm even going to provide for you the exact data set that you're looking at too, so that you can download that from the link in the description box down below and work alongside me in tandem. And hopefully in doing so, really pick up how and when to apply certain parts of this process and then take it and run with it, work with it in your own images. So without any ado whatsoever, let's dive straight into this. You are going to need a few different tools. I'm going to provide for you also along with the data, my tool set right here, all the tools that I generally use. Now some of these are completely free. As you can see, my friend Bill Blanchen's color masking tools, his HT stretching tools, and also the collaborative effort from him and Mike Cranfield, Bill Blanchen and Mike Cranfield, the narrowband normalization tool. All those you can go ahead and get for free. But there is some paid software here. BlurXTerminator, NoiseXTerminator, StarXTerminator. I purchased these for myself a while back and I just don't want to process without them anymore. They're absolutely fantastic. If you want to try them out and you wouldn't mind showing some support to my channel, then please do check out the links in the description box just down below. Give the free trials a go first. I urge you to try them and see what you think. For me, there was absolutely no going back. They just made processing more fun, more flexible for me, and I absolutely love them. I think it's the best money I've spent in Astro. But without going on too long about that, there is one final thing you'll need. I want to keep this as brief as possible. So scripts, toolbox, and you can see I've got GradientXpert right there, GradientXpert. I've got a video on this on how to install it on my channel. It's probably out of date by this point, if I'm being honest. Things move so fast in this game. So now your best bet is go to the GradientXpert website, look for the installation instructions, take it from there. It really isn't that hard, guys, and I'm sure you'll be absolutely no problem at all getting this thing off the ground. Now, let's dive straight into this. So as you can see, if you just drag the image that I provided into your PixInsight workspace, you should have something that looks like this. If you have dragged the tool set in and they haven't appeared for you, by the way, then just right click and arrange icons and it should pull them to your presently active workspace. But the first thing I'm going to want to do is open up STF and just click the little nuke icon on this thing with this window selected, and that'll apply a screen transfer function, which is just a visibility stretch. No data has been altered whatsoever, and we can see we've got a few different issues going on with this image. Some correctable, some not. So an image of the problem rather of the non-correctable variety would be this big old ugly halo right here. It is what it is. I think I'm just going to think of it as Marilyn Monroe's little wart, which wouldn't be the same without it. But correctable stuff, such as this little brightening in the edges, the brightening towards the actual corners, a little bit of overcorrection from flats, the overall gradient going across the image, and also this little bit of stacking artifact. This is completely normal stuff, but I'm going to point it out to you anyway. All that needs to be gone. So let's first off get rid of those stacking artifacts just using dynamic crop. So I'm going to double click the tool. It opens it up on our currently selected window. And by selecting the corners, you can drag two directions at once, or you can select individual areas and crop as you wish. All that's important is getting rid of all the stacking artifacts on this thing. They need to be completely gone. Once you're happy, click the tick and away we go. That's finished at this point. Now I'm going to run straight away into scripts, toolbox, and GradientXpert. I'm going to go ahead and apply this at complete defaults and just let it do its thing. I usually find it works absolutely, wonderfully well, just left alone. All right, then guys, so GradientXpert is now finished. You'll notice it changed the kind of view of that screen transfer function, so it looks like the colors have changed a good bit. I'll just zoom things up ever so slightly using the mouse scroll wheel, then resize our active window by clicking the little arrow down there. Looks like it's changed things a lot. If we just hit the nuke icon once more, back to normal. It's back to our kind of normal view. This is where we want to be looking at things for now. But as you can see, that brightening in the middle's gone. The overcorrection of the flats in the corners, that's gone, but everything else has been preserved just how we want it. That's absolutely perfect. Now, if you're familiar with this region, you'll notice it's actually flipped over on itself. So we can correct that just right now by using fast rotation and vertical mirror. In this case, should correct it just fine. And as you can see, It's now back into a more normal orientation with the North American Nebula down there, the Pelican up at the top right, and the rest of this whole region up to the left. I can't actually know the name of that part as it happens, but it looks much more like I'm used to seeing it now, so we can continue on with processing. Now, the next thing I want to do, this is all very formulaic at this point, by the way, so don't worry too much about min-maxing any of these movements. It's not that important right now. I'm going to apply BlurXTerminator in order to try and increase these details on display along the edge of the wall, the Pelican Nebula itself, and shrink down the size of those stars and make them look much more attractive. I'm just going to do that literally by opening it up, making sure it's completely reset. You can adjust these tools if you wish, by the way, the amount of star sharpening, any haloing, and also the amount of non-stellar sharpening. So non-stellar sharpening is these kinds of features up here, anything that's not a star. You can mess with them if you wish. I'm just going to leave them at defaults for the sake of simplicity. Let's see how it looks. Okie dokie, so BlurXTerminator has finished, and wow, if ever you needed an advert for BlurXTerminator, here it is. I mean, crikey, if I just undo and redo, you can see the difference for yourself right there. Those stars are shrunk, they look beautiful. The shape is improved, the size is improved, along with non-stellar detailing being either preserved or, in some cases, where appropriate, enhanced. It's phenomenal. I really do love these tools. As I said, I'm not going to hark on too long about them. Give them a go for yourselves and see what you think. I mean, look at the difference right there on the Pelican. Unbelievable. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit of residual noise left, especially apparent in some of these lower contrast, lower signal to noise ratio areas, such as these fluffy bits of nebulosity right here. So I'm going to go ahead next and apply NoiseXTerminator. Now, you could leave this at defaults. I think this image isn't that noisy overall, so I'd probably drag this down a touch, anywhere around here. Don't stress too much about it. Just give it a go. If it looks good to you, great. So as you can see, that's finished now, and yeah, it looks absolutely fine to me. All that I'm looking to eliminate from this image is that kind of mottly, low-level salt and pepperish noise. I'd really have to zoom in to try and show you what I'm talking about, but we can give it a little go on a darker region down here. So this is mega zoomed, 12:1, but you can see it goes from a granular appearance to much more smoothed and flattened out. And that same thing is happening everywhere, but at the same time, using the power of AI, it's preserving all the tiny, fine little details. Unbelievable. Again, hashtag not an ad, but these things are amazing. Give them a go for yourself and see what you think. Now, before I use StarXTerminator now, I want to take this image into the non-linear phase. And all that really means is I want to stretch it. So currently, completely linear. It's unstretched. At this point now, if I just want to go ahead and stretch it super easy, I'm going to use HT-Stretch Linked RGB, as we've been viewing this STF in a linked state. That'll be absolutely perfect. If you're proficient with and confident with generalized hyperbolic stretch, then by all means, diverge from this tutorial at that point and use this. But for the sake of keeping this simple and quick, HT-Stretch Linked. Okay, so that's finished. It just took a moment to apply, and we now have a non-linear stretched image that we can continue to work on. Now, before I take this any further in processing, I just want to address any further underlying issues there might be. So it looks like the black level is a little bit too gray for my liking at this point, and there's a few ways you can adjust this, but I'm going to do it using the curves tool, because I also at the same time just want to amp up this image just very slightly before I continue on with processing. So I'm going to use the real-time preview, RGBK, and I'm going to boost up very slightly the high end of this. You can see the higher I get up here, we're going to be focusing on brighter and brighter parts of the image. So just a little boost to the brighter parts, a little drag down with another point on the curve on the lower end. That's going to be working on these shadow regions, these background regions, that kind of thing. So that's just pulled that down into a much more attractive state to my eye. We haven't gotten out of hand at this point. We haven't started stretching stars too much and things just begin looking crazy. If I just drag a small preview window over the wall right there, You can see stellar size is all but perfectly preserved with such a gentle S, but overall the image quality is improved before we even move on to the next steps. So I'm going to accept that, just click it, close down the curves transformation, reset it as well so you don't accidentally apply that transformation again in upcoming steps. The next thing I want to do now I've applied that curve is just pull the stars out real quick. So I'm going to use StarXTerminator for this. I'm going to click to generate the star images. We do want those stars after the fact, and also to use unscreened stars so that we can rescreen them afterwards, as screening is a much better method of putting the stars back in rather than simple addition. How I used to do things where it did work, but you know, brighter regions could sometimes get a little bit crazy. So now that's finished, go ahead and apply and just wait for it to process. Alright guys, so that's finished now. The stars have been taken out. As you can see, we're left with two separate images, one containing the stars, as you'd guess, and one containing the starless image. So I'm just going to minimize the stars image for a moment now. We don't need that just as yet. We're going to instead be focusing our attention on this starless, nebula only version of the image. So the next step we want to do, make sure this window is selected, the starless window. Open up narrowband normalization, and using the real-time preview, we can check what we've got. Now, for me, it looks pretty darn good at this point. I know the colors are wrong, but it's advantageous for them to be in this state. In particular, the hydrogen regions being yellow makes them very, very easy to mask out, leaving the other colors completely untouched. But you will note that the oxygen regions look a little bit drab. You could work with these, but for me, I'm going to make use of the oxygen 3 boost slider. Just bring them up just a touch. Now, don't let this get really out of hand at this point. Let's say if I go too far, the oxygen 3 looks great, but at the detriment of the hydrogen alpha regions, it's starting to kind of bleed into them almost a little bit. It starts to just look odd. It's going to make later processing just harder than it simply needs to be. So a small boost is all that you need at this point. So 1342 in my case, using this stretch, that's going to be fine. I'm going to go ahead and apply it, close the preview, reset the tool, close the tool, and we are good to go and continue on with this thing. Now, I'm going to go ahead right now, and make a yellow mask from this before we make any further adjustments. So we've got that. That's great. What we wanted from that really is to see all those HA kind of knobbly, detailed regions being selected by that mask, and the regions of oxygen largely being left alone, and it's done exactly that. That's absolutely perfect. I'm going to apply a few rounds of mask blur just by dragging and dropping it. You see the effect that that's had if I just undo it. It goes from being quite a granular mask to far more smooth. Absolutely smooth enough to work with. Wonderful. Now, before I apply this to the image, I'm actually not going to mask out the oxygen. I'm going to stretch the whole image and preserve the oxygen manually. And the reason for that is because I think sometimes masked oxygen, given that it's usually such a diffuse signal, can start to look a little bit artificial. I do think that this is a better way to do it. So curves. I don't think there's any reason you can't, by the way. I'm just going to try and talk you through what I'm doing. So curves, open up a preview. We want to boost the blues. That's the signal we're talking about. We're going to drag up in the middle, and you can see it's boosting those oxygen regions just fine, but the background, not so great, right? It's starting to bias towards blue. We don't want that, of course. It goes without saying. So by selecting a new point on the curve right there, somewhere around the midpoint, if you select too low down towards these black values, small movement isn't very granular at all. It makes huge changes to the image. Up here by the midpoint, that same movement, far more manageable. Do you know what I mean? You're really stacking the deck in your favor and making things easier to begin with. So I'd say small drag down in order to bring back under control these regions that shouldn't be getting boosted. By this adjustment, you can check that that's happening properly just by clicking back and forth right there on the window. The preview updates, you can see with it applied, without it. In particular, the background regions are being left completely alone. That's perfect. So that's a correct adjustment. But I would say, in my case, you'll note that the kind of oxygen regions now look a little bit tinted towards purple. We can correct that and get them back more towards what they kind of should be, a tealish color, by adding a little bit of high point green. So up here, just bring it up until that teal kind of color is achieved just visually on the regions where we want it. That same issue has of course occurred because it's just a very broad strokes application of green at this point. So once again, we want to drag down the low point of the green until we preserve that background. So if I just show you now, cycle back and forth, the background is basically exactly the color they should be. So about there, I think was correct. Looks good to my eye. Well, the oxygen is now popping out quite strong, maybe a little bit overly strong, but I think we can actually work with it at this point. And I'm going to go ahead and just apply a very small, this is optional, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it to make later processing hopefully a touch easier. Very small boost on the saturation for the whole image. So that looks good. Again, don't over season the cake at this point because it's going to start to get out of hand and it won't be processable if you do anything like that. So small adjustment is all that's needed, if any at all. Hopefully I've done a decent job of explaining that kind of process to you just there before we move on to this next step now. So now we've got the oxygen close to where we want it to be. I'm going to go back to that yellow mask, drag and drop that and apply it to our image. Once again, reselect our main image. Once again, reselect a real-time preview. And this time, we're going to start manipulating the red curve. So I'm going to bring up the mid. As you can see, we're much more effectively now because we're using a mask, preserving all these background regions. And we can apply this correction to exactly where we want it. So if you know, if I just raise up the reds, possible to go too far, things start to look, you know, completely wrong. So just a bit until we start to achieve more of a, I want to say like a rose gold tone, rather than these plain greenish yellows that there were before. Small steps is all that's needed. You don't have to get this right in just one huge step. It's much better done in smaller steps. We're going to now use kind of the green curve to our advantage once again, and I think the best way to demonstrate this would be perhaps to zoom in on the pelican right here. There's a bit of a demonstration region. So up here, the brighter edges, I want to bring those out, make those kind of a yellowish bright color. It's going to add a new step of dynamics, if you will, to the tones of this image. So I'm going to increase that curve very slightly. You'll notice pushing everything else towards the yellows once again too, but all I'm interested in right now is this edge. So I'm going to drag back down the low parts of that curve. So as you can see now, if I just cycle back and forth a sec, that's the kind of adjustment that we're looking for. It's not all done in one. Small boost to saturation. Again, you could apply more, but I'd rather make a few small adjustments than one huge one. It's far easier to get it right that way. So I'm going to look at the overall view once again, make sure I'm not doing anything that looks garish, starts to look unnatural, as we really want to avoid that, as I think that just looks out of keeping with what we're trying to achieve from a naturally beautiful region. So I'm going to apply that. That's one step. It could probably take, if I just hit apply again, it probably could take that and it gets a little bit close to where we want to go. I think we can do better by doing this thing manually. So I'm going to select another region now, down on the wall. And we'll process a little bit from here. So red, once again. Small boost is making those reddish tints pop out. It's starting to look a little bit more rosy and rather nice, I would say. Some kind of coppers and deep golds popping up now. Same thing once again, really, on the green, just a very small boost to the edge and a drop in the darker regions has achieved the exact look that we want, where we've got a kind of golden frosted edge and the rest of it's been kind of left alone. And once again, a small saturation boost takes us more towards where we want to be. I'm going to take another overall look just by resetting the preview window. It doesn't look too bad at all, I would say, at this point. So I think I can go ahead and apply that. Definitely not a next step now. So reset that exposure preview window. And at this point, I'm going to select the mask, if you can, and get rid of that. We are actually finished with that mask. I'm going to make some further adjustments to this image with no masks whatsoever now. So making sure that your main image is reselected. Preview once again. You're going to become good friends with that preview button as it really is useful. But now overall on the entire RGBK, everything on this thing, I'm going to apply another small S curve to this. So you can see the effect that would have just by raising the whole thing. It gets unmanageably bright. By dropping the whole thing, it starts to look kind of drab. You know what I mean? So let's get the best of both worlds, bright where we want it, dark where we want it. And just mainly by looking at this image, not so worrying too much about what that exact S-curve looks like. Don't try and mimic this perfectly. Instead, look at your own image. And once you're at the point where you think, that looks correct, stop. No further adjustments necessary. You know what I mean? In terms of the overall bright areas, dark areas, the relationship there within on my image, I'm happy with that. I think that looks good. I'm now going to apply overall a boost to saturation. This can be tricky because when I do this, I'm also saturating kind of dark areas in the background that can become a little color mottled once again, but I think that looks absolutely fine. At that level of saturation, I'll go ahead and apply. You could actually go another step with this if you want and have it look like that, but I like this more kind of gentle approach to this thing. I think that looks really quite pretty at this point. And now you may wish, if you want, to go ahead and use scripts, utilities, and if I could find it, dark structure enhance right there. That would work to bring out a lot of these filamentary details around here in this this dark nebulosity. Could look really good. I happen to think this looks actually fine as is, so I'm going to once again open up the stars and reintegrate them back into the image, and we'll call it just about done at that point. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. I've applied for you as part of that tool set, just a small set of tools that I made. Super simple stuff. It just goes through the rescreening process. My friend Rick Voss, I've also got his script, utilities, reintegrate stars just down there. As you can see, this is a script that does the same thing for you. You point it to your starless image, your star image, and click combine, making sure that the screening method is indeed rescreening. And that'll do the same thing, but just to demonstrate my own tools real quick. Starless over the starless image, stars over the stars image, and rescreen over any of the images. And there you have it, a completed image. Now, practice is really the key with these things. I would say go ahead and do this a bunch of times, and you'll probably end up with a bunch of different results. That's absolutely fine. You know, keep going until you find something you're happy with. Don't be afraid to make blends of your favorite images using pixel math if you would like. Experimentation is the key, and I hope that this has been useful to some of you guys out there. It's quite a pretty data set, I think, so yeah, I hope you've had some fun with this one. I'd just like to say, as always, thank you very much indeed to everybody for your support. A huge thanks to anybody using my affiliate links, who will use them indeed as well. You guys absolutely rock. And also, what would I be without, at this point, my army of supporters on YouTube memberships and Patreons? You're all the absolute best. Thank you so much, guys. If you've enjoyed this, leave a like on the video for me. It really does help out. And with that, I'll leave you and just say, enjoy yourself. That's really what it's all about. I hope you've learned something today. And yeah, cliss, guys.